This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning. We also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 27th of August 2020, and I am Miss K.
I'm JM.
And I am GK, and in case you missed the headlines, here they are. In the Daily Nation, graft family loses looted NYS riches. In the Standard, Uhuru set stage for referendum. And in the Star, revealed money trail that nailed Obado for children. Let us begin with the Standard.
Yes, so as you know, today is the 27th, and this is the 10-year anniversary of the promulgation of the new constitution. And so the Standard is telling us, following yesterday's speech, that the president discerns a constitutional moment.
Yeah.
Yesterday, we defined what a constitutional moment is. And since the president asked us to take the bold path as opposed to the populist path, let me take this opportunity to break down one of the bold paths some stakeholders presented to the BBI task force. And that is a parliamentary system of government in which citizens elect their head of government and perhaps even head of state indirectly. So the parliamentary system presumes an executive prime minister. The executive prime minister is the chief of government. He is a powerful prime minister who serves under a ceremonial president or a monarch. And so the question that begs for us Kenyans is, how do we elect the executive PM in the parliamentary system? And that is done in an indirect method using what is called a closed party list system, similar to the model of South Africa. So let me break down the South African model. So in SA, prior to the election, each political party submits a list of its candidates in a numbered order of preference. This means the most popular candidate will be number one, the next number two, and so on and so forth. After the election, the percentage of votes cast for each party is then summed up, and thereafter the seats in parliament are allocated in proportion to the number of votes cast in the election. So a party that won 30% of the votes, for example, will get 30% of the seats, and so on. So if we were to transition towards this model here in Kenya in 2022, you would not vote for your specific member of parliament for your constituency on election day. In fact, we may not even have constituencies at all. Rather, you would vote for your preferred party. And if that party has a majority, it then goes on to form government, and its leader becomes the prime minister.
Wow, this is so complex.
I agree with you.
But you've explained it
GK.
really well.
And I wonder if Kenyans will be able to understand it, or it'll be like with the governors, where we understand the consequences, not in 2022, but in the subsequent
election.
Gosh,
Perhaps.
and then if we're using the party list, it means that parties then have to have some sort of order, some sort of, democracy and way of
Internally.
doing things. Yeah, they have to be able to...
In fact, it must be such in that way, because the unintended prime minister could be the leader of any party, so-called
Exactly.
party.
Yeah.
And you have no way to control them.
We can strengthen the election laws as well as the party laws to allow for a high threshold of democracy and so on, to make sure that everybody gets an equal chance.
Fantastic. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, we have a 3-part criteria that we're going to use to break down the headlines. We will ask ourselves, is it topical or speculative? Is it repetitive or groundbreaking? And is it thoughtful or just plain lazy? This is topical. This is off the speech, the pronouncement that the president gave yesterday. And it's also forward-looking. What is in the future for Kenya?
Think taking the bold path, we could tentatively call this our winning headline.
Our winning headline?
Yes.
Yes, we will pack it. Let's look at the others. So in the Daily Nation, graft family loses looted NYS riches. The family in question is none other than the Ngiritas. And they, basically the Assets Recovery Agency filed an application that was successful, and parcels of land, cars, and all sorts of things are going to be returned back to the state to the tune of about 95 million. Now, the interesting thing here is that they received in excess of about 400 million shillings from dealings with NYS. So this is literally a drop in the ocean, but a success nonetheless. The fact that they've gone through the court process and have arrived at this, I think, is a win for anti-corruption agencies. The Daily Nation also says it was a bad day for corruption, as President Kenyatta in his speech pronounced that there's 21 days to investigate whatever's going on at the impropriety, that's going on at KEMSA, the Kenya Medical Supplies Authority, as well as assigning a new private PS to join public health, a Mr. Francis Owino, which was later retracted. So the Daily Nation isn't actually clear on whether this is an actual appointment that is sticking or it is hearsay, given that there was the statement was retracted by State House. So we will wait and see on that. I feel like we should just toss the Daily Nation.
Toss it.
Which leaves us the Star.
In the Star, the story is revealed money trail that nailed Obado and 4 children.
Yeah, and might I add that yesterday the Star also said it was an Obado-related headline.
I don't know, someone can't say that money has been poured because you're really targeting this one family.
Yeah.
Well, it says that anti-graft detectives have unearthed a complex money trail showing the Migori governor, Okoth Obado, received millions in kickbacks from county suppliers that is likely to cause him a nightmare in court. They reference that the same troubles are the ones that haggled Kiambu governor and as well as the Nairobi governor Sonko. And they say that the Director of Public Prosecutions, Nudin Haji, said on Tuesday that investigations revealed that the cash was used to pay school fees, upkeep, maintenance and medical bills for the governor's children studying in Australia, Scotland and the United Kingdom. Unfortunately, there's a direct trail between the suppliers and the children.
Yes.
However, I would say that I feel like this is a severely unfair story for the children.
Yeah.
The power dynamics that plays between parents and children is such that I'm not in a position until I'm full grown and away from being directly under their care to question my parents and what they would do or who they'd send me money from.
And even when you're out of their care, there is still that power sort of relationship with your parents as a child. So you trust that when they bring you something, that they're not doing it with ill intent. Or
criminal intent or to make me liable for their own.
Yeah, Obado should have been a better custodian for his children.
And for that reason, I'd say we toss the Star.
Tossing the Star, there you go. Which leaves us with the Standard as our winning headline. Onto the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country, where we also have a 3-part criteria. We ask ourselves, is it humorous or dry? Is it satirical or pessimistic? And is it effective or just plain lazy? If we can begin with the Standard.
Yes, so today's cartoon depicts Wanjiku in a graveyard around numerous other graves. And each tombstone represents a different scandal, including the latest COVID-19 scandal. There's the Kenya pipeline scandal, there's the NHIF one, etc. And Wanjiku is saying, we know where the bodies are. It's time we start digging, suggesting that we should unearth all these scandals and deal with them conclusively, that we haven't dealt with them conclusively. Reminding us of our, very tainted state of affairs as a country.
Can we toss it?
We toss it.
For being pessimistic.
God.
Okay, so in the Daily Nation, what do we have?
We have tiny caricatures of Raila Odinga sitting on a red chair with a red tie, reminiscent of his Jubilee affiliation. And his chair is titled Acting Deputy President. And on the seat next to him is Deputy President... actual Deputy President William Ruto, sitting on a red chair as well with a yellow tie. And his chair is titled Acting Official Opposition.
I love this cartoon.
What I love is that they're so tiny.
Yeah.
Maybe perhaps because they're ill-fitted for these roles that they have taken.
But they've
or
actually
assigned
swapped.
themselves.
They've actually, I think, swapped roles.
Yeah.
And we've seen that in recent times when Raila has come out to defend government.
Yeah,
and Ruto, even just with this KEMSA scandal.
Yeah.
And then Ruto's on this other side, they're blasting government.
Yeah.
So this is an accurate depiction of the state of affairs right now. Funny.
Exactly, very nice. In the Star, we have a record player from the Republic of Kenya, President of Kenya, and a small caricature again of Uhuru Kenyatta in a red shirt, and the caption there is broken record, and the record is playing 30 more days, 30 more days, 30 more days. Yeah. We also know, we feel this pain. But yes, every time he has come out to say, we're extending for another 30 days and extending for another 30 days. Perhaps he would be wise just to say, till I say otherwise, we are continuing said lockdown.
But we have to cut him some slack. He's always between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah,
Between a right and a right. He wants to
exactly.
open up,
Yeah.
but then again, he doesn't want us to go down the path of Brazil.
Exactly, for
Yeah,
sure.
and the 30 days as well, the idea is to keep the public guessing.
And hoping.
Hoping, but never satisfied. So maybe it might lapse after 30 days, but maybe not.
Maybe not. Okay, so guys, who do we give it? Between the Daily Nation and the Broken Record.
Daily Nation.
Daily Nation?
I'll give the
yes.
Daily Nation.
There
They
you
look like
have
little
it.
kids.
Daily Nation. And now for our final thought. But before we get there, please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Our final thought today is inspired by the book On War by Karl von Clausewitz. It was first published in 1832. That's a year after Claus's death. He was a Prussian, born in 1780 in Berg, and he entered military service in 1792 at the age of 12. And he continued to serve in the military until his death in 1831, at about 51 years.
Yeah.
So this book is his writings and his musings on what he witnessed when he was in service during the 18th and 19th century wars, specifically the Napoleonic Wars. And he was inspired by Frederick the Great and Napoleon to write this book. It's considered a classic and a definitive study on warfare and on military strategy and history. It specifically outlines tactics, operations, and strategy.
Yeah.
And it addresses war between states. This is because Clausewitz himself was a Prussian, and that was what constitutes half of modern Poland and all but southern Germany. And On War addresses conflicts between states. It doesn't look at terrorism or any of those modern things that we are used to now.
Yeah.
Clausewitz his ideas remain widely taught in military schools today, and he's still considered an essential to the modern strategist. In fact, the US military considers themselves a Clausewitzian force. That's a fun fact for you to remember. Also note that the book was incomplete. He never finished it, and it was edited after his death, then published. He then asks us to look at why would we need a strategy. For Clausewitz, strategy is the necessary response to the inescapable reality of limited resources. And he's right. Any force, no matter how great, or any country, no matter how big, has limited resources. So therefore, strategy is about making choices on how we will concentrate those limited resources to achieve a competitive advantage.
Yeah.
And he says that the talent of a strategist is to identify the decisive point and to concentrate everything on it, removing forces from secondary fronts and ignoring lesser objectives.
Yeah.
In fact, he says then now, speaking about the topic of the book, war, that war is not an end in itself, but it is an extension of politics. Violence is used as an attempt to force one's will upon their opponent.
Interesting. It was a complex read.
It was 700 pages, 8 books.
So why do we go to war? He talks about, in part, the bigger picture behind war and the benefits socially and economically. Wars birth and sustain states. War forces states and leaders to improve their organization and their administration. And so professional armies require large amounts of funds, which can only be raised by well-organized states. And for a state to raise money via taxation, it must first have a functioning bureaucracy that creates and runs complex governing organizations. Unable to organize both its troops and subjects, a fighting nation will fail very early on. And so once they're organized, states then use violence to defeat smaller factional violence so that it can sustain peace and trade in the country. And that is because one of the biggest sources of wealth and tax, obviously, tax revenue is trade. Thus, it is in the state's best interest to maintain peace and order for undisturbed commerce. War is good because it then therefore suppresses violence. And there's a classic example here is a Roman road system. So these roads, as you might be aware, connected the entire Roman Empire and allowed very quick travel. And they were safe, they were well maintained and well guarded, because the state had an interest in maintaining these safe and expeditious trade routes, these passageways, absolutely. And with more opportunities to create wealth and the resulting high standards of living, people eventually become less prone to violence.
Yeah.
All in all, statistics from a different source, violence has been declining. In the year 1250, an average of 1 out of every 100 people died a violent death.
Wow.
By the year 1590, it was down to 1 in 300. And in the year 1950, it was 1 in 3,000. And so the reasoning is that wars through, though gruesome in and of themselves, cause a decrease in violence and violent deaths because they lead to more highly organized, lawful, and prosperous society. So before we get to a space of prosperity, we have to do a war, a total war, and then we consolidate and we stabilize.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's one quote I got from the book which I really liked. No one starts a war, or rather, no one in his senses ought to do so, without first being clear in his mind what he intends to achieve by that war and how he intends to conduct it. So this week we've been looking at strategy, and which is why I quite liked this book, even though it was complex, because even through the war he was sort of shifting and saying, okay, this is the strategy behind the war when you choose to engage in it. So one of the things to bear in mind as you do strategy for war is complex and unpredictable. And because it's complex and unpredictable, this is because the terrain and weather, for instance, cannot always be predicted. Chance events are always a factor. And so he concedes that war is both an art and a science. And he suggests that war cannot be considered either art or science, because sciences, you have an action that the armies may carry out, but they may not always produce the reliable result that a science experiment would, right? So it's unpredictable in that way. And he says that the role of a commander in an army, for instance, is to engage in a balancing act of trying to manage the uncertainty and plan for advantage, reacting always to the changing circumstances and situations. And for this reason, he says that defense is the stronger form of war. So most people think, when you think of war armies, you're like attack. But he says, no, defense is actually the more sophisticated sort of strategy. And he says the object of defense is actually preservation. It's easier to hold your ground than to take somebody else's. And so a force on the defensive has a number of critical advantages over force on the offensive, right? And this again is because of the unpredictability of the things that you deal with once you're in war. And so he says, simply outlasting an opponent and denying it its goals might be a worthwhile strategy to pursue that your own limited aims, which is survival of your army or government or the exhaustion of the opponent. So you're basically waiting for the opponent to just act upon you. And he says in the Waterloo campaign of 1815, they knew that Napoleon was coming. And so all they had to do was wait in their positions near bases where they knew their strategic strengths and everything, and wait for Napoleon to come, and then they were able to then outmaneuver him in that way. So awaiting the enemy blow is what he calls, the defensive strategy. And that's the key to a good war strategy. So it was really interesting. Yeah. Key is preservation in war. So on a day, guys, where we had a winning headline from the Standard and a winning cartoon from the Daily Nation, I want to leave you with this. The first quality of a warrior should be courage, because war is dangerous, because ultimately it is real human beings who will have to fight and win the war. So no matter the skill of the commander, nothing can be won if the courage of the soldiers is deficient. So be courageous in all your strategies and everything you wish to do in life. Kindly subscribe to our YouTube channel, but find us on TV on GoTV, Prime Media,